Hey there, welcome to the Swarm plot tutorial from my Seaborn series of videos. If you haven't seen my previous video about strip plot, feel free to click on the link up the top right. Today's video is not going to be a really long one. In the previous video, I told you that we're working with a couple of different functions to show categorical data. So the two that are really similar are the strip plots, the previous video, and the swarm plots. These two plots we really use to complement our box plot or violent plots. Before I go into that detail, let me quickly show you what does a swarm plot really look like. So whenever you hear the word swarm plot, think of a pine tree shape kind of graph. It doesn't necessarily have to look like a pine tree. Most of the time it can remind me of a pine tree. So this is from the tips dataset from Seaborn. I'm going to show you how to load it and use it. Essentially, a swarm plot shows us how much of the data is concentrated in which part of the range of the data. For example, in this very example, I'm showing two categories because swarm plot is used for categorical data. So the data for dinner time, people who are dining in, and the lunchtime guests of a restaurant. The y-axis is the total bill, and I can see that a lot of diners around dinner time spend around $10 to $25. How can I tell that? Well, I have a lot of markers around there. However, for lunch, they pretty much tend to spend between $8 to $20. So this is a really quick overview of the data. But I said that we normally use it as complementary aid for box plots or violent plots. For example, in this box plot, as you can see, there are two different categories of yes and no for the colors. So blue is the yes, and the orange is the no. And the different categories are Southampton, Cherbourg and Barktown, and Queenstown. So we have box plots sitting at the back, and we have swarm plots sitting on top. Why would we get them to plot on top of each other? Because with solely using box plots, you don't really know how many data points for each category there are. So if I didn't have these markers, these round markers, I wouldn't be able to tell you that, yes, Southampton has generally more data compared to Queenstown because I wouldn't see those dots. But now that I have the swarm plot on top, I can tell you that, yes, Southampton data is more reliable because there are more data. So you may ask, what is the difference between a swarm plot and a strip plot? There is only one difference. In a swarm plot, you do not allow points to plot on top of each other. They have to plot right next to each other. However, in a strip plot, they can just overlap, and we don't really have anything to stop them from overlapping. Without further ado, let's go ahead and make our own plots. Let's make a new Jupyter notebook, give it a proper name because we are organized data scientists. This is number 8, and this one is for swarm plots. Like always, import Seaborn as SNS. I'm not going to import NumPy because I'm not going to use it. Let's load the tips data, the restaurant data, and use the SNS load dataset function to load the tips data. Let's look at the first top 5 rows, and we have the total bill, the tip, the sex, were they smokers or not, what day were they dining in, and were they dining for dinner or lunch, and what was the guest size. Now, let's use SNS cat plot. The data is the tips data. The X variable, I want to use the sex variable, so I want sex categories, male and female on the X-axis, and the Y data, let's for now use the total bill, so how much money they spent. This is not going to give me a swarm plot because the default of a cat plot is a strip plot. If I want to get a swarm plot, I will have to say kind equals swarm, and it will give me a swarm plot. So this is the most basic swarm plot. If I look at it, let me show you how to interpret this data. I have the male and female on the x-axis, and I have total amount of money they have spent. I can see a lot of males generally spending more than females because the swarm plot is sitting higher overall. And also, a lot of these people spend somewhere between $10 to $20 anyways. If I look at how much money they tip to the restaurant staff, I can look at the tip column, and I can tell you males are tipping more to the restaurant staff. It's probably because they are spending more money on eating anyways. If I were to look at the smoker, let's see if the smokers are paying more or not. So the smokers are, I can't really tell you that smokers are tipping more because the structure of these two are pretty much the same, but there is this person or this group of people that have tipped a lot of money compared to others. However, I can tell you that the visitors to this restaurant were mostly non-smokers compared to smokers. How do I know that? Well, I can see that there are way more orange markers on the plot compared to the blue ones. Add even more information to this plot. So for example, I can say, I want to understand if the people who visited this restaurant, were they more females or males, and were they smokers or non-smokers? So what I can do, I can say, set the hue to be sex. What it will do now will give me a legend that tells me males are in blue markers, females are in orange markers. I can't really tell which one is more, which one is less, because they are very intertwined. What I can do, if I set the dodge parameter to true, it will dodge the two groups separately. So now I can easily say, yes, this is for the smokers. There were more smokers that were male compared to females. There were more non-smoker male compared to non-smoker female. So generally, because there were more male visitors to this restaurant, both categories apply. Now, the other thing I can do, I can say, well, this looks a bit busy. Maybe instead of changing the color to sex, I want two different plots. I want one for male, one for female. So if I set the column to sex, I will get two different plots. This is for the male community. These are the people who did smoke. These are the people who did not smoke. And this is for the female visitors. These ones are the ones who smoked, and these ones are the ones that did not smoke. So let's talk about making it prettier. So what I can do, I can add an edge color that is black. If I run this, you're not going to see any really black color on the edge because it's very thin. I just need to add a line width of, say, 0.4. And you will see the black edge color coming around those markers. Now, you might say, well, I want to plot them horizontally. Now you have plot them vertically. I want to plot them horizontally. Just simply change the X to Y and the Y to X. And that will give you a horizontal representation of the swarm plot. I'm going to change it back to what it was. So this is X, this is Y. And what you can do, you can say, I want the X to be based on day of the week. Now, I don't care about the smoker and non-smoker. I want to say, on Thursdays, this many males visited here, which was more than Thursday female. On Friday, I guess the number of visitors were the same in male categories and female categories. They pretty much look the same. Let's get rid of the column of sex. So let's plot everything on top. I can't really dodge them because there is no hue to this now. Let's get rid of aesthetics as well. Just make it really simple. If I were to plot the same box plot and then put the swarm plot on top, all I need to do is SNS box plot. Data is tips. X variable is the day based on what is on the top, and the Y variable is the tip. This will give me a box plot for the same data. And if I plot the swarm on top, I'll have to say SNS swarm plot of data equals tips. The X variable is the day, and the Y variable is the tip. So now you can see that the same markers are plotted on top of the box plot, which allows me not only to see the box plot distribution of the data, but also how many data points were there. So if I want to see the legend, I'll just add hue equals day, and that will give me the legend. Let's change the X and Y because I would like to have more space. Make this Y, make this X. And I guess this is just a bit easier to look at. That's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for more videos coming your way.